Expanding Mind with Erik Davis, Thursdays at 2 p.m. on the Progressive Radio Network.
Welcome to another edition of Expanding Mind. I'm your host, Erik Davis, and we're going to march forward in our continual quest to explore the cultures of consciousness. I did some very interesting research this fall for an essay I wrote on the history of magic, and particularly the relationship between stage magic, conjuring, tricks, as we sometimes call them, and mystical experience, and particularly the tricky behavior of demons. And there was a particular interesting book I came across by a fellow named Reginald Scott from the 16th century called The Discovery of Witchcraft. And he was an interesting fellow because at that time there were widespread beliefs about the reality of witches. And this was at the time of the witch burnings, and it was even though in many ways society was becoming more rationalistic and starting to turn towards science, the idea of the witch as some kind of demonic agent in the world became very popular, and of course many poor women and men had their lives destroyed by this ideology. But there were some people who were skeptical at the time, and Reginald Scott wrote this whole book that was about how the ideas that people had about witches flying and witches having their Sabbats or whatever were kind of ridiculous, and that they could be explained through much easier means. And at some point in the book, you come across this huge section on stage magic. And he's basically saying that a lot of the effects that people associated at the time with demons or magicians or sorcerers could be better explained through stage magic. And it was actually quite clear when you started to see pages and pages of these wonderful descriptions of tricks with balls and tricks with chickens and tricks with knives, and that the guy was really into magic. He was really into it. And it kind of captured a very basic way that we feel about magic in the modern world, which is that it's basically a trick. And that in the old days there might have been supernatural explanations, but in our days today, we realize that those gurus and magicians and sorcerers and shamans are really just playing tricks. Reginald Scott captured something very particular about our modern world. But I'd like to say that really fundamental link between tricks and secular ideas is a little bit more difficult to place than we think. And that, in fact, if you go back and look at the history of shamanism, of magic, of mystery traditions, you'll find that there's a much more subtle balance between effects that are produced through, let's say, sleight of hand, and the experiences of wonder, of mystery, of magic than we might think. And that, in fact, these two stories are much more intertwined than someone like Reginald Scott would have us believe. But in any case, this is just my launching point for today's discussion and conversation with Jeff McBride. I'm very happy to have this marvelous magician on Expanding Mind. One of my favorite things about Expanding Mind is we've had a number of remarkable magicians on the show, and I've really learned a lot by thinking and experiencing the kind of work that they do. But before we bring Jeff on, I want to introduce our co-host here at Expanding Mind, the lovely Maja Daou. How are you doing, Maja?
I'm doing good.
Oh, you're sounding bad. That your cell phone signal is poor. We must get you a better megaphone.
Is this better, or should I try again?
Yeah, it'll do okay. Just wanted to see, have you been, I know we went to the Magic Castle in Los Angeles together not too far ago. Have you been experiencing other wonders of Los Angeles magical community of late?
I did. I went to see a spook show at Brookledge, which was put on by Erica Larson, who is, of course, the daughter of of Bill Larson, who started the Magic Castle. And it was like in the original Magic Castle in their home before they turned it into Magic Castle. And it was just amazing. Erica organized so many amazing performers. There was like a contortionist and a sword swallower, and then, several illusions were very good. It was hosted by Rob Zabrecki, an amazing magician. And I did some research on the performance and shamanism as well, and what you were saying is so true. And, that performance magicians are so closely linked to how shamanic magic can work. There was one thing I was reading about that said that the shamanic performance kind of like instigates ecstasy through contagion. Like when someone sees something impossible, that they can then like go into a state of ecstasy, which is kind of like how the magic works, even in stage magic. Like when you see something you think is impossible, it kind of like picks up in your head a little bit, and you experience a little bit of that awe and ecstatic moment, like just like how you were saying.
Well, that's a wonderful introduction to Jeff McBride, but Maj, I'll ask you to call back again, and hopefully you'll get a better connection with your phone. But I'll bring on Jeff here. Jeff, thanks so much for being on Expanding Mind. Are you there, Mr. McBride?
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, very good.
Magically appeared, as if by magic.
It did have quite a presence when you entered into the stream. It was like someone's there, and there wasn't someone there before.
Now you see him, now you don't. Oh, it's great to be talking about this topic. So Maja was over at it's called Brookledge, right? The Larson family home.
Just want to, when we have folks on Expanding Mind, the thing that I love to do is to start off with a little personal story. And I know that like magicians often begin their practice very young. That often the things happen in their childhood or in their youth that sort of set them off on what is in some ways a kind of peculiar path in terms of relating with other people and understanding how reality is constructed, really, in a lot of ways. I'm really curious. I mean, you have this wonderful, rich career, and you've done television shows, and you've performed all over the world. You've done remarkable, wonderful things in the limelight. But I'm kind of curious about what was some of the earliest experiences you had that set you off on this path.
Well, for me, before the magic was really the mask was the transformational tool for me. My memory of how I got into magic was really that was through libraries. And the way into that was, it goes back to, I think, being really scared of monsters. I guess when I was a kid, I was totally freaked out by anything that had to do with monsters. So eventually I figured out somehow that instead of being scared by them, I would just kind of become one of them. And then I started being a fan of Lon Chaney, the Man with 1,000 Faces, and all these monster movies that were on TV as a kid. And I learned about Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, and in there was something that would change my life, and that was masks. In those magazines that I got as a kid, because I was kind of like fascinated with monsters, there were masks, Don Post, special effects, werewolf masks. So I get enough money together when I'm about, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years old, and I send away for one of these Don Post over-the-head Wolfman masks, and that starts this whole thing. As soon as I put this thing on, I totally transform into a little monster. And my hobby is going around at night banging on windows of my neighbors and trying to spook them. And I realize, in retrospect, the incredible power that the mask had, both to frighten me and then to empower me, to transform me into this powerful creature instead of to being disempowered. So it was really the power of the mask. And then studying, looking up masks in the library, I found magic books. And this was a whole thing that was new to me. And I started, as any kid did, just reading books and practicing magic. And all of a sudden, when I would perform this magic for people, I had an incredible power to enchant. And I had this strange magical knowledge and technique that could just stop people and make their eyes, wide open and their jaws drop. And over the years, I started combining the two, the masks and the magic.
Well, I want to stay with the mask for a little bit because I think that, that's such an important part of your performance magic, but it's also something that it's something we all experience, and yet we kind of don't really think about it. Like, oh yeah, of course you can put a mask on and something can really change. But if we go into our experience, we'll realize that sometimes in the right circumstances, either the right performance or at a street theater or at a festival, the right mask in the right situation is a god. We have the emotional experience, however you want to call it, of being in the presence of a supernatural kind of being. And I bring this up partly because it's funny you talked about the young experience. One of the most formative experiences for my imagination in my life was I was 5 years old, and it was Halloween, and my stepfather knocked on our garage door, so it wasn't like even the main entrance to the house. It was kind of the back part of the house. And I opened the door, and he had put on this really scary old man mask, and he had a poncho on. So it was like a totally low-tech, costume. But
right.
It scared me so much so that I can still taste this supernatural fear in my mouth. But I learned something then that I have never forgotten about that transformative power. It was really kind of an initiation. And like you, I was very interested in Lon Chaney Sr., and I did makeup, and I did a little bit of magic, not so much, but that seems to me something very special about your magic that you got there through the mask, which is in some ways it's complementary, but it has its own spirit to it as well.
Yeah, and for me, it's the mask is part of it. It was one of the keys, and magic was part of it too. And then, finding the drum. I was also a drummer, and the power of the drum and movement and rhythm. And when we put all of these things together, we're reassembling the primal toolkit of the shaman. And I think an effective performer, a stage performer, a transformist, someone that takes the audience through an initiatory experience in a theatrical context, draws on all of these tools: rhythm, trance, magic, fire, drama, storytelling, mask, optical effects. And when these are all put into the ritual of the magic show, that's when it really becomes a potent transformational experience. And I think a lot of magicians have forgotten that, and the magic is today. A lot of the magic that we see either live or on television or in media is just a shadow of what once was a very vibrant, cohesive sort of a transformational experience. Magicians do tricks with jokes, and many magicians are very, I think, afraid of the potency that magic can have. And there's a return to that, to strong magic these days, to reclaim a lot of the tools and the craft of the shaman, and to kind of reconstruct the art and to push the boundaries of what magic is and means in society today for audiences.
No, it's really an incredible transformation for me, because I think that our attitude towards that phenomenon, towards that kind of wonder, is so primordial, but it's also very much key to our modern world. Like, a lot of people are recognizing the kind of limits of the secular modern world, and they're looking for another way out. They don't want traditional religion. They're exploring new alternatives. They're exploring different ways of being, and it really feels like there's something about that classic, skeptical, secular, modern viewpoint that just isn't cutting it anymore. And you can see that really clearly in the way that magic has been constructed in modern society. Like you say, very much throughout the 20th century, it's entertainment, it's laughs, it's tricks, it's a little bit of ha-ha, I know something you don't know, with some very important exceptions, but nonetheless, in a lot of ways, it has been in service of a kind of secular, skeptical, disenchanting view. It's like, yes, we can do something that you don't know how we're doing, but we all know that it's just a trick. We all know that we're just performers. But something is shifting now, and people are realizing that those various quote-unquote tricks, things that use optics, things that use sleight of hand, things that use misdirection, can be in service of something that's greater than just, oh yeah, I had a little gas, or like, oh, I didn't understand what was going on, and it was kind of amusing. It's like those elements are part of a larger worldview, and it's also changing the way people look at shamans. I mean, I'd love to hear more about what you feel about that, because just to throw out one idea is that when people first started, anthropologists first started talking about shamans, of course they came, they'd encounter them and they'd have these great stories around them about their powers, and of course most of these anthropologists were totally secular scientific folks, and they were like, they're just tricksters, they're just magicians, and a lot of the anthropological lore is like, look, they do this trick here and this trick there. And now, as the shaman is becoming more and more a potent figure in our modern imaginations, as people are starting to wonder what's going on there's this shift, and it's not like you don't think they're doing something with their hands, but we see that there's this much larger story, much more transformative kind of effect that they can have. So I'd love to hear you riff on that, because you've been on this for so long.
Well, there's an expression that we use that was coined by a friend of mine, Paul Harris, who really pushes the edge of the magic envelope, which is he calls it the moment of astonishment, when an illusion, when a magic effect pops your paradigm, and all of the structure and undergirding of what you know is true is now gone, and you are floating in space with limitless space with no ground of reality around you. And this is a very exalted and high state of consciousness to achieve. And the magician, a very good magician, can take his audience and place them in that state where they're now in liminal space. So one of the powers that the magician has is as a psychopomp, as an initiator, as a person that can take an audience through an initiatory experience. Sometimes it's almost a near-death experience or a death experience. That's why there's all of these kind of horrific dismemberment illusions that are so popular, these box tricks where people get dismembered and torn apart and put together. This theme of death and resurrection, being torn down and then reconstituted, plays out over and over and over again in the themes of the magic show. But there's something more important. Over the last couple of 100 years, magic has kind of been put in a box and institutionalized and made into a commodity and a marketable product and a nice hobby for young boys to play with. And it has very, archetypal themes, and some of them, aren't so pleasant. These death and resurrection themes that Rogan Taylor points out in his book, The Death and Resurrection Show, is that really his thesis is that the shamans of yesterday are the showmen of today, and very effective showmen of today, reclaim the tools of the shaman to take the tribe through this cathartic experience of death and resurrection, using these illusions, sometimes sleight of hand, optical illusions, that really are metaphors that point beyond mere tricks to the great mysteries of life, the eternal transformation of life and death and rebirth. And that's the potent theater that I'm exploring and that I am drawn to. And one of the things is breaking out of the conventional theatrical contexts, literally the theater, the little box that the magic show is put on. And then the magic show is not just in that theater, it's put on a little box preceding him on stage. And there's been a movement in the last 20 years to get outside of the box, and you see that with the rise in popularity of street magic now happening anywhere at any time in the world instead of in little theatrical context. I think it's wonderful we can have places and institutions like the Magic Castle where people can go see fine entertainment magic. But I also think there's something, very primal and transformative about, bringing our ritual theater experience out to the playa at Burning Man and having one of our magical fire rituals happening, as far out as you can get at Burning Man. Our installation we set up at 12 o'clock and the fence. It's as far away from Burning Man as you can get with still being on the official grounds of Burning Man. And when people approach that, they're not approaching a magic theater. And it's not necessarily a safe space that's known. They have to enter the unknown. And the magician is the one that takes them across that threshold into the unknown. So the more strange, the more unfamiliar the territory is, I think the more effective the magic.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's really true, because then it's like not in context, right? People, like you said, when they go into a theater, they're expecting to see a certain thing and they know it's a trick, but you take it out of context and that's when it has the most power, because the real implication of a magic trick, when you show someone that there's something that can happen that they think is impossible, is that you're showing them really that the entire world is a trick, right? You're relating it to the illusion of the Maya, of like reality. And when you go into that liminal trickster world, when you can really put someone in that space when you pop them, like what you said, what you're doing
paradigm popping.
You're reminding them that all of reality is an illusion, that it's a trick. And so when it really works, which I agree, I think it's like when they're taken by surprise almost in those street magic situations, you seriously alter someone's consciousness. You alter their state of consciousness into that paradigm shift. Yeah,
I really feel that, David Blaine with his, in the world sort of, kind of survival, endurance, stunt magic has kind of blurred the line between what is performance art, what is actual kind of ordeal encounter, and what is magic. And I think that's been a very good thing, because it's erased some of the very safe boxes that had been placed around magic recently.
Well, let's talk about a little bit about ordeal, because that too is another one of those classic elements of both, the shamanic path and also vision quests in so many cultures, particularly of Native American culture, and I know you're very influenced by that as well. How does the sense of personal ordeal, or even ordeal that the audience is in some sense asked to go through, or the participants asked to go through, how has that played out in some of the things that you've done?
Well, let's just look at the magic show. There's ordeals happening, or ordeal encounters all the time within the context of a theatrical magic show. Whether it's, the magician or the assistant getting dismembered in the box, and having an audience witness the ordeal, or, which happens more often in a magic show, is a member from the audience is brought up on stage and put through what's often a very humiliating and for the audience humorous ordeal.
That's
the comedy
true.
magician.
You're right. And they're almost
like
standing.
Penn and Teller that take audience members out. Blue Man Group, in their way and their performance art, they take people from the audience and put them through all kinds of strange ordeals. Amazing Jonathan here in Las Vegas, he'll get, he'll pull people out onto the stage and, basically abuse them to the audience's delight. And, so there's an ordeal going on there. I tend to see that and kind of bristle at that. Humiliating the audience member rather than empowering them. There is an ordeal element that's shamanic to the magic show. Let me put it this way. I have a piece in my show called The Sorcerer's Apprentice, where I go out into the audience and, using rhythm and drumming, I summon a young person out of the audience, about 13 years old, 11 to 13 years old, and they're brought to the stage and put through an ordeal where it's a search for coins, where I'm pulling coins out of them, and then finally they're able to do this magic, and then they're returned to the audience with a huge round of applause. Well, basically, this is modeled after Mircea Eliade's rites and symbols of initiation. Mm-hmm. In my show, what I'm doing as the shaman is going out into the tribe and taking from the parents the young boy who is not a kid and they're not an adult yet. And then they're brought up onto the stage in front of the audience, and I leave for a moment. I leave the kid in liminal space where he's not a performer, he's not an audience member. And this is symbolic of, in rites of passage, of being left alone in liminal space. Sometimes in tribal cultures, it's days at a time. In a theatrical setting, it's just for a few moments, but it's to symbolize that. And it's a very strange feeling for both the participant on stage who's going through this initiation and the audience to watch the magician walk off stage, and now there's this young person on stage alone. Then I return, putting the initiate, the person from the audience, through this ordeal of magical creativity until they get the mojo, until they get the magic. And at that moment, there's kind of an awakening, and then I actually symbolically pass on the symbol of magic. The magic wand has been passed down from the ancient shaman to magician since the beginning of time, and then I pass an actual magic wand and gift it to the young person on stage, and they go back into the tribe kind of as a hero. Mm-hmm. So I've modeled this. This is one of the most successful pieces of theater in my show, and it's modeled, on that initiatory ordeal of taking a youth and initiating them. And this is and some people don't see this. Many people don't see this. They just see an amusing coin trick with a young kid from the audience. Mm-hmm. But the archetypal structure of the routine reinforces this eternal cycle of the magician having to pass on the magic to the youth through these.
That's one of the things that I also really like about your work, although I've never seen your show live. I've just seen clips in the documentary Jeff McBride, A Magical Life, and other things, is that there's something, because in addition to having these, esoteric and hermetic influences, you're a very mainstream magician in some ways. You're very successful. You're very in the limelight, and you've done a very interesting job of layering what you do, so that an ordinary audience member just out for a good time in Las Vegas, whatever, goes to a show, has a good time, maybe just enjoys himself. But if you're tuned, if you're open, if you're aware, if you're ready, all of those kind of metaphors, then you'll see that, like, oh, wait, something's more going, oh, wait, there's something going on here. What is that? And so there's, like, mysteries embedded in the accessible performance. And that's a very, you must have worked kind of almost extra hard to do that, because I think a lot of times when people start becoming successful, then their commitment to the deeper dynamics sometimes goes away because it's just so busy. They have a big show. They want it to be huge. They want people to see them. And that becomes a thinner, and even if they still say that in interviews, it becomes a thinner and thinner reality. But you've really worked hard, it seems, to really keep up that connection, both in your big performances, but also in your life. You're always doing, you do neo-pagan fire gatherings, and you go to Burning Man, and there's a side of you that you kind of constantly renew with a less theatrical engagement with this stuff. So, I mean, how has that been for you to, like, kind of get bigger and yet still be devoted to these, in some ways, very kind of esoteric or magic, deeply magical desires and inspirations?
I was very fortunate to have success early on in my early 20s, just by doing so many shows in Manhattan, to get picked up by a great manager, and then put on the road with Diana Ross as her opening act, and coming to Vegas and working at Caesar's Palace and for Steve Wynn. So I'm in my mid-20s, and I'm right at the top of my career. I'm headlining the Las Vegas Hilton, which was Elvis's big room, and I realized that I hit some sort of a ceiling here, and I was wondering, is this it? And right around that time, my friend Marlon was studying shamanism and took me out into the desert for a 3-day vision quest. He had me some reading materials to prepare myself, and when I came back from this experience, I rediscovered the roots of magic, the fire, the drum, and it started me on a quest to get deeper and deeper and deeper into the history of ritual magic, ceremonial magic, transformational magic, which led me across the country to different fire festivals, different fire ceremonies. I met my wife, Abby, at the Rites of Spring, which is a festival that's held back east in the Berkshire Mountains. And then we would go across country and then eventually around the world, exploring the connection between music, rhythm, trance, mask, magic, entertainment, performance art, transformation, and human potential. Now it's a pretty big, pretty wide area to venture into. So it's endlessly fascinating. And again, by going on these quests to encounter, wisdom teachers and elders that have some sort of magical transmission that they need to pass on, that led me to opening up our mystery school here in Las Vegas.
Yeah. No, I want to talk about the mystery school, but we have to take a break right now on the Progressive Radio Network. This is Expanding Mind. I'm Erik Davis. We're talking with Jeff McBride, and we'll be right back after these messages.
You are listening to PRN, Progressive Radio Network.
Hi, I'm Karen Hartglass, and I'm here with a healthy holiday tip. Want to avoid putting on all those extra pounds during the holidays? Don't skimp on eating healthy foods before any festivity, thinking you will save on calories. You will only be tempted to eat more. I recommend eating a big salad and steamed greens before going to a party where you know there will be lots of decadent treats. You can go for small bites of different treats, but won't be stuffing yourself too much with rich food. No matter what you choose to eat, enjoy it. Join me on Ask a Vegan every Sunday at 7 p.m. where you can call in and ask questions about my favorite subject, food. Have a great holiday season.
This is Peter Roth, the host of Energy Stew, which airs on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. My show interviews fascinating authors, inventors, and researchers of new understandings, techniques, and discoveries that can enhance and transform our lives. What is our potential and how can we fulfill it to the max? To find out, tune into Energy Stew and Peter Roth at 8 p.m. Thursdays on Progressive Radio Network.
Dr. Molly Barrow with a holiday tip. True happiness comes from giving, rarely from getting. Select a person or family in need in your neighborhood and give a little time, food, or gifts to make sure that they have a holiday to remember too. This is Dr. Molly Barrow, and from all of us at Progressive Radio Network, we wish you and yours peace, love, health, and prosperity.
Hello, this is Erik Ochsner, your host of the best jazz show on the air on Progressive Radio Network, Erik's Sounds of Jazz, every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I play the best jazz ever recorded by Louis, Sidney, Bessie, Billy, and all the others. Remember, Progressive Radio Network, Erik's Sounds of Jazz, every Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
You are listening to PRN, Progressive Radio Network.
Welcome back to Expanding Mind on the Progressive Radio Network. I'm Maja Dawu here with Erik Davis. imminent. We're talking to Jeff McBride, magician and performance artist, shamanic performer, and hermeticist extraordinaire. And it's funny, Jeff, that you mentioned the Mircea Eliade book, Rites and Symbols of Initiation, because that was literally the book that kind of started me off on my shamanic stuff. And, in it he does talk about the performance that you explain that you do, and in it he mentions the dismemberment as a key theme of initiation, and also, like, starvation and fasting, which was one of the things David Blaine did, that hunger artist thing, which I thought was kind of like a little take from that book, and also Kafka as well. But I was curious, before the break you were talking about all of these kind of integrated shamanic experiences you have had, and I wanted to ask you the same question that I've asked Max Maven and Eugene Berger and some of these other fellows that have engaged some of these things in their performances, and that is, have you felt the repercussions of your initiation in your own life as a result of your performances? Meaning, have you been approached by people that have told you that they experienced a transformation by witnessing your performance of these things? Have you actually effectively become a shaman for some of your audience members?
Well, the answer to that is absolutely yes. And it happens not only during the course of, let's say, I do a 90-minute theatrical presentation in a theater. There are certain things, certain effects, certain awakenings, certain mind-expanding experiences that audience members share with me that happen in those contexts. Yet I found the deeper transformational occurrences happen at other venues outside of the theater. We'll say that there's different levels of initiation. And one of them is the magic show. That's where people often meet me or see me or experience me the first time on a film clip, on a television show, maybe even a radio show like this. And then they'll go to my website and they'll find out a little bit more about what I'm up to, because something strikes true or something resonates within them. They are seeking something more, and they've just gotten a taste of it. And the same way I follow these threads that run through my life that bring me to more deeper, more meaningful, life-enriching experiences, people will come to my website, find out about our mystery school. And then they'll be initiated into the arts of the stage conjurer, and also given some keys into the deeper, rich history and mythology of magic. Then perhaps they'll attend one of our other events that we put on. We put on a number of transformational weekends, not only at the Magic and Mystery School, but at some of our other fire festivals that we put on that are like Burning Man in one way because they're based on gift economy. But unlike Burning Man, they're purification ceremonies that last for 3 days long with a very, about maybe 100 people, not 50,000 people. And they're very focused on creativity and the performing arts, music, dance, rhythm, and through doing these sort of experiences, people awaken to their own potential and have breakthroughs in their own life using theater as the prime motivating force, theater and creativity and improvisation. So the magic show can lead people, if they follow the thread, to deeper and deeper levels of experiencing the mysteries of life. And it all begins with a card trick.
No, I think that's a great way of putting it. I think that we are not sensitive enough to the way in which the surface of, let's call it popular culture, can initiate. And it's not the same initiations as going, on a vision quest or going down to Peru or even going to Burning Man necessarily, although that's very much part of our popular culture in some ways. But it's more that initiations are waiting everywhere. They're in a book, they're in rock records, they're in movies, they're in walking down the street, and that one of the things I've always tried to encourage people to do is just to pay more attention to what's actually happening and not paper over an extraordinary experience by saying, like, oh, yeah, it was a good movie or whatever. It's, yeah, but what actually happened in that moment when there was the reveal or the end of 2001 or whatever the transformative experience was, even if it was in sometimes kind of cheesy stuff. So you were just watching some dumb TV show, but there's some scene, there's some line, there's something there that triggers you. And if you follow the thread, if you have that idea that the world is a labyrinth within which there are threads that lead into deeper levels, that it becomes a much more playful and magical place, and you can go through these layers. So initiation is not just being on the mountaintop. It's something that we have around us waiting all the time.
And people could be listening to this broadcast right now on many levels. Some could be following with rapt attention, and it's resonating within them. Other people are just kind of getting it, or what are these guys talking about? And other people are listening to this broadcast as background noise as they do their laundry and dishes. So it's, you know, and all of those are fine. You know, you can't push the river. People have to be ready for the experience. You know, it can happen with music. You can listen to a piece of music and then say, oh, you know, I'd like to be able to do that. And now there's a whole initiatory ordeal about picking up that guitar and learning all of those, you know, finger placements, and then the lessons you learn about collaborating with other musicians and. But some people, you know, as Terence McKenna said, don't want to peek under the board. You know, they don't want to peek at the wiring underneath the board. You know, they're happy with just staying on the outside of it and appreciating it on a purely theatrical and aesthetic level. And that is fine. But for people that want a richer initiation to explore the deeper levels of magic, which leads them to the deeper levels of themselves, it exists. Those encounters are there. Those rituals and rites of passage are waiting there for them, for the people that will take that next step.
And talk a little bit about Burning Man. When did you first get out there, and what was that? How did that change your view of things, or how did you see it as a an environment to play in?
I'm going to go back to 1969 when I was growing up in upstate New York. My dad, who is my hero, took me to Woodstock. That was my first festival. And that's where I saw my first drum circles, and that's where I saw, you know, that's where I first met my friend Fantuzzi. You know,
oh my God, I know. Everyone has to meet Fantuzzi.
Everyone, you know, he's the Baba, you know, he's a rainbow Baba.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm 9 years old, and I'm at this amazing festival. I've always had, in my life, festivals. And I met my wife at a festival 21 years ago at a fire festival, playing drums around a fire. And the drum and fire and magic have taken me to all good places. And the way my way into Burning Man, we were producing a fire festival called Fire Dance out in Santa Cruz a number of years ago, and we decided to do an expedition with our crew out there. Because we've been evolving this ritual of fire and magic, that if people are interested in about it, they can go to our website, vegasvortex.com, see a little video clip and see some of the stuff that we're up to. We create this transformational fire ceremony. It's a rite of celebration through rhythm and magic and expressive arts. And we said, you know what? These people are ready for this. And I think that's this year's theme of Burning Man is rites of passage, isn't it?
Indeed.
Yep. So through collaborating with a friend of mine, Johnny Dwork, Johnny D, who is a veteran burner, we created a alchemical fire circle ritual that we take out to Burning Man. We do it one night during the burn. It's on Wednesday night, from Wednesday to Thursday morning. It's a 12-hour ritual ordeal of initiation. And we drum and dance and create this ritualistic fire space, this alchemical laboratory basically in the middle of a desert for people to encounter and then to be put through, to put themselves self-facilitated through a 7-stage process of alchemical refinement. It sounds like a mouthful, but it's just something you have to find out on the deep playa. It's the deepest playa art there is, and perhaps we'll see you out there. You have to find it.
That's wonderful. What are the other things you're up to now? I know you have your fingers in a lot of pies. There's this Wonderground thing that's happening in Vegas.
These are what I do, and what I have always done since I began my magic career, was create contexts and spaces for people to have transformative magical experiences. One of them is our Magic and Mystery School, my magic show that plays all around the world. I'm based here in Las Vegas. And I have a nightclub called the Wonderground, which opens only once a month, and it's kind of an epic celebration of performance art, magic, and what we call illuminated night culture. People that are looking to connect with very high vibrational artists and performers and interact and create art. And we have dance troupes and live art and body painters and magicians and close-up magic and acrobats all working together. The show changes every month, and it's broadcast. We broadcast it and stream it live on the Internet free.
Wonderful.
And it's a free event.
Do you sense that Burning Man has helped kind of spread festival culture into places that it wouldn't necessarily have been? That something is kind of breaking in larger or more mainstream contexts? Or how do you feel about that?
Oh, absolutely. I think the media exposure alone, the global media exposure of this, what's essentially a potlatch, isn't it? The tribes coming together to share their gifts and bounty, and it's a huge giveaway. I think the phenomena of gift economy, I think it's been the global megaphone for gift economy. And if people want to, explore the richness of gift economy, then, they can read books like Lewis Hyde's book, The Gift, and find out more about that. I think he's a veteran burner himself, Lewis Hyde. Have you had him on?
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Sure, but I do know that Burning Man has greatly impacted my work and people that work with me. That the vibrations ripple out from the core of my work. We published a book this year called Gift Magic with Professor Larry Haas, which is based on magical performance that ends with gifting the person a small souvenir that encapsulates the connection that you've just made with them. And these are all magical experiences that end with this very physical, tangible touchstone of the experience. And the politic that informs the book is even the book, all the proceeds of the book go to a foundation that helps magicians when they're in financial straits. So we have, that sort of sensibility bubbled out of Burning Man and is reaching mainstream magic culture through our book and our works and our DVD. So I think that many people that get attracted to Burning Man Festival, fire festivals, festival culture in general, are bringing that back into their small towns. And it can start with something as simple as a potluck dinner.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
I'm curious, talked about that.
I'm curious, Jeff, if I'm just wondering, what kind of reception do you get from other magicians that maybe are not too into this? Because, there's a whole school of magicians that kind of oppose you, that are like the skeptics, like Penn and Teller, who refuse to integrate magic and shamanism into their performances, although really they kind of do that anyway.
I think our parties are more fun.
But do you
I just think our parties are more fun. And I think that, it's like Schopenhauer said, great ideas go through three stages. First, they're, laughed at as being totally ridiculous. Secondly, they're violently opposed. And third, they're embraced as self-evident truth. I'd be very skeptical of a magician that didn't believe in magic. It's like a doctor going to a doctor that goes, yeah, this medicine stuff, I'm not quite sure it's all,
Yeah. And as I said at the beginning, I even though in some ways the magical world is a relatively small subculture as part of our big, buzzing, crazy society. Even within the world of entertainment or something, it's not like top of the heap. That this particular kind of, not, I wouldn't say conflict, but this sort of transformation or tension between skepticism and myth and live, in-your-face mythopoetics is actually really important. It's really rich because there's something about our fundamental willingness to trust and to allow ourselves to have experiences that, you know, from a skeptical perspective, you might be afraid because, like, oh my God, this means like I'm turning into a bubblehead or I'm turning into a religious believer and I don't like religion. But you're like, but there's another way. There's another way of framing these extraordinary experiences that are transformative, that don't require you to leave your brain at the door. And there's a tension there that I think is really, really profound. And you've seen it change, man. I mean, you've been doing this for a while, and it's a different world now than it was in the early 1990s when you started the Mystery School. I mean,
when we first started the Mystery School, we rattled the skeptic and rationalist cage so hard. People were like, "What are these guys doing? What are they doing? We've spent so many hundreds of years, you know, cleaning up the art of magic and putting it in a tuxedo, and now you're putting mud back on you. Oh, I can't believe it." It was like we're dragging it back centuries, you know, when we're actually trying to, you know, reconnect this rich tree of magic to its shamanic roots, you know, and to see what kind of wonderful fruit it will bear, you know, and here come the skeptical and the rationalists and, you know, everybody from the Randy and Penny Teller camp, you know, axes sharpened in hand to cut down anything that we might grow. And they're still doing it. I mean, we wrote this beautiful book on gift magic, and the skeptics attacked it. You know?
What was their problem with the book?
Subversive that magic could actually be framed as a gift instead of a market commodity.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah,
that they can't see that they can't, you know, see or experience the value in a gift. That magic is a product that has to be bought and sold at some level. It can't be free. So we're still rattling the cage. You know, 20 years later, we're just, you know, pushing the envelope, and, you know, now we're deciding to just, you know, who needs the envelope? Let's just burn the envelope.
It also seems that there's at least in my, since I'm interested in a lot of kind of academic discussions about magic, that there's some real interesting things happening there. I mean, on the one side, you have, on the kind of skeptic science side, you have a lot of interest from neuroscience in the kind of phenomenology of performing, and it's like neuroscientists are realizing, like, oh my God, magic or illusions, sleights of hand, have been taking advantage of factors in the human brain and how perception works for thousands of years. So if we study these things, we're actually learning something about how the brain works. And then on the other hand, you have a much, much greater reception to these sort of esoteric, hermetic, transformative, shamanic streams in terms of how people are understanding the world, because I think in a lot of ways our sense of, like, what's actually going on in the world is very confused now. And so all of these things are leaking in kind of from both sides. And the question I have for you as we're kind of wrapping it up here is one thing that you seem to be also very aware of that to me speaks partly of the influence of festival culture and that whole alternative spiritual tendency as much as magic, maybe even more so, is the intention to pass it on, the intention to build schools, the intention to recognize that as one ages in your craft, there's a responsibility to inspire and to communicate and to genuinely pass on information. You know, in the Hermeticism, there's always this sense of an initiation where you learn and there's a school and then you pass it on. It's not just about being an individual performer, making your individual mark on history, and then at some point you die and you're in the record books. It's that we have an obligation in a way to pass this on, and that seems to be something that has very much motivated you in the Mystery School and in other things that you do.
Well, there's, in Hermeticism, a lot of the initiation is self-initiation, and it's done through the transmission of literature, book initiation, through having Gnostic experiences, reading the texts that have been left by the great Hermeticists and the alchemists. So there are plenty of books that approach the higher art of magic. One of them is Higher Magic by Oscar Teal. Talks about a loftier goal of magic. The author Sam Sharp, in his book, Neo-Magic, and there's a number of Sam Sharp books, he was a Hermeticist and was very informed by mythology, and he's left a lot of creative work. My teacher, Eugene Berger, and the Mystery School are writing and passing on this knowledge through books. If people want to approach festival culture and find out what it's about, of course, I think you did the introduction to Tribal Revival is a wonderful place to start. Or the Death and Resurrection Show by Rogan Taylor really does an amazing job of wrapping up a lot of loose ends that have been hanging out there for a long time and tying them together to see how the shaman of yesterday has evolved into the showman of today. And we, actively, every month we have courses at the Magic and Mystery School where we are mentoring students and passing on what we know about the practical art of magic, the performance end of magic as well. If people are interested in the mythology and the archetypal structure of magic, they can find their way to that too when they're ready for that. And when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah. Any further questions, Baja?
I'm just so glad that you were able to come on the show, and I just love what you're, reinvigorating in the world, and I'm so glad that you do the work that you do.
Well, it's wonderful to be able to have this first encounter, and hopefully if we follow our threads to each other's worlds, we'll have time to have some sort of mythic encounter.
And you've also been on Star Trek.
I have gone where no
I didn't know that. I was just reading
before.
through the Wikipedia, and I was like, what? I must have seen that episode because I saw all those.
Yeah, I play a trill. I live inside of Jadzia Dax on Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
That's just absolutely...
My character is Joran Bellar.
Great.
Yes.
Well, I just want to let people know that to find out more about you, I mean, you have a lot of places, a lot of pies, but McBrideMagic.net is a great place, and it's a wonderful site too. It's really well designed, and you get there's links to clips, and then also you have a YouTube stream so people can see the kinds of things. We didn't even talk about kabuki. We didn't talk more about mass. I mean, there's so much stuff to do, but I really appreciate you getting on the show, and it's just been a great conversation. Any other things people should know about?
Well, the McBrideMagic.net, I set up a virtual encounter. I actually stood in the center of my room where I live, our magical mystery school here in Las Vegas, and we photographed it, and I worked with a number of artists, including Duncan Eagleson, creating a 3D immersion of the Magic and Mystery School that people can walk through, take books off the shelf, all in virtual time, and you can listen to some of the music that was created by our friends and my wife Abby, as you explore. So we have set up the virtual Magic and Mystery School, which, if people are listening, which is the next thread for you to follow.
Wonderful. All right. Well, from Erik Davis and Maja Daou, you've been listening to Expanding Mind on the Progressive Radio Network with Jeff McBride, and we'll see you next week. Keep your minds open.